If you have a picture of you anywhere out there with you in that vehicle and you're talking about your conquests and exploits, it's going to make it very easy for that provider to decline it based on either a racing or a tracking exclusion.
You're listening to Drive Sport, the amateur track driver podcast. Here's your host, DMC.
Hello and welcome to Drive Sport. My name is Dave, but for this show, I like to go by DMC, and I'm here to help you learn how to have fun, stay safe, get your car home in one piece while you're enjoying high-performance driving at the track. And the moment I started doing this podcast, there's an old friend of mine that I knew I had to have on this show. This is Sam Dark. Sam, how you doing?
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me. It's fun to be here with you, friend.
Yeah, and we go way back all the way to junior high.
Yeah.
But you have had such an illustrious career in car dealerships and car sales. And I really wanted to get your perspective for this group, and you can speak authoritatively at a very high level. So for those who are not familiar with you, give us just a little rundown about what your expertise is in car sales and car dealerships.
So I'm COO for an auto group, 41 stores, 4 states. We're in Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan. We're Michigan-based. And we have everything store-wise from Ford to Ferrari. That's the joke. No. And we're active in all things automotive and even, as you mentioned, in racing. We sponsor a NASCAR team, Spire number 77. He's a local driver, Carson Hocevar. You'll see him on Sundays as part of the NASCAR teams. And then we also have a Ferrari store, which Aaron Ziegler, owner of the auto group, bought recently in the past year. So it's been a fun foray into all things automotive and racing. So that's where I come from. But And then, it's kind of interesting. I had a career in insurance with a Swiss-based insurance carrier. So, when you talk about track racing, you talk about racing and doing anything fast, I guess maybe I have an interesting perspective, not representing the auto group here in the conversation, but certainly my own perspectives and opinions. And it'll be a fun conversation. I look forward to it.
And let's emphasize that, too, that you're not coming here with official policy from Ziegler or anything like that. You're sharing what you have seen and what
my own idea.
Yeah, exactly. And I do want to highlight, too, that you really have such a wide experience in dealerships, because when you started washing cars, and now you're COO, and you've done everything in between. So you have so much experience to draw from in this conversation.
Yeah.
Just briefly talk about, you mentioned that Ziegler supports racing. You have a NASCAR team. I know that you personally have gotten out to the track a few times. Just give us a little bit of a taste of what you have done in terms of an amateur track driver.
So I'm not like yourself. I haven't bought a car. I haven't tracked it, started to race and compete regularly. But as part of the auto group here in the Chicagoland, there's a racetrack. It's called the Autobahn. It's very close to where NASCAR will return next year. And there's a little track called the Autobahn Country Club. And it's actually a really cool place. They've got a full track. They've got these condos where you can have a car. You keep the car there. You can have mechanics take care of it. Once a year, we take our technicians out and we do a kind of a President's Club celebration. So we do that with our NASCAR drivers. So the competition there is, can you beat a NASCAR driver at the autocross? And it's a heck of a lot of fun. And then we go over to go-karts with everyone and do a go-kart race, which is also a heck of a lot of fun. But it is interesting because, the NASCAR driver will get out in the radical on the track, and you've got everything from Mazda Miatas to Ferraris to, a radical type car out competing and driving and racing together. You and I have been in Utah.
Yeah, I brought you and your daughter out to do autocross. We did the Lotus experience together, and then also you came out with your daughter and drove my car out on autocross.
Yeah, which was also a heck of a lot of fun. So, yeah.
So that's a good place to go with my first question to kind of set things up. You have 41 dealerships. That's what you said. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so of wide variety of types of cars, what are some of the more popular cars that you see people buy in terms of sports cars that they might do something like with autocross?
So we don't sell Mazdas, but I'm familiar with Mazda. Seems like it's a really good starter place to get on track. And in fact, one of our prior NASCAR drivers, his name's Josh Balicki. He got his start with go-karts and then transitioned into Mazda Miatas. We don't have the Porsche brand, but Porsche I know is very popular and common to have those on. Ferrari is outrageously popular, right? In fact, Ferrari, more than any other OEM, I think spends a lot of time and money creating these track experiences where they'll invite car owners to come bring their own vehicle, and they'll facilitate experiences at things like Daytona, the Indianapolis, the big NASCAR track there, and other tracks. They'll facilitate those experiences where drivers can come out and just have a great time. I think people do it a lot with Mustangs, Ford, the gas, not the new EV variant. BMW, I think it's very common. You see it commonly across the BMW brands. And then, Chevy, Corvettes, and some of those.
So generally speaking, again, not talking about policy, as you've worked with various dealerships throughout the year, what is the general temperature that dealerships have about people taking their car out on the track?
It's interesting. Here's how I would look at the conversation. You ask, how does a dealership think about this? I actually think a dealership is pretty agnostic to it, right? So a dealership per se wants to allow customers to have a great experience however they want to do it. And over my time in automotive, you see customers do all sorts of things. They'll chip a car. They'll do all sorts of performance enhancements. The question is how does what we call the OEM think about this? And that's the car manufacturer. So there's a manufacturer that will create the car, and then we distribute the car. The manufacturer who creates the car is the one that puts the warranty on it. We're the service point for that as an auto dealership and an auto group, but we go back to the manufacturer for that warranty claim or warranty repair. The OEMs, by and large, have varying viewpoints on tracking a car. Most OEMs, not all, but many, exclude racing. So anytime you take a car on a track, there's not going to be coverage for, and actually there's 2 points here. Number one, does the failure happen mechanically? You throw a clutch, the transmission's gone, something happens in the vehicle because you're racing it so fast. And then there's the physical damage that results when you spin it and go off into the ditch. So there's two people you're really looking to. You're looking to the manufacturer to cover a mechanical challenge with the vehicle, and then you're looking to your insurance company to cover the physical damage. And OEMs or manufacturers most often don't love it. Some big exceptions to that would be a BMW, would be a Ferrari, would be a Mercedes-Benz, some of the other maybe higher-end luxury vehicles. However, as soon as you say that, are they going to cover all the damage related to it? The OEMs differ in how they do, not damage, but mechanical failures related to racing. It's not consistent, but it varies. I would say no OEM universally allows track use. They're nuanced a little bit. And some of that might even depend on the level of relationship you have with the dealership and their advocacy, and then how they go back and sell them on the repairs, whatever those repairs may be.
So, and that's why I wanted to ask this, because as I've seen in discussion boards and people just generally thinking about this is a really hot topic. This is a hot question. And I see different things crop up, and I wonder, is that just being relayed? Is it sort of apocryphal knowledge that's that, or is it actual policy? For example, I have seen, and I'm not saying that this is the truth, I have seen people say that in particular, Corvettes, they're okay with you taking it on the track, that the policy says that in particular. Or Porsche says their policy doesn't specifically exclude track use, yet it kind of allows for it, but it kind of depends on the dealership and whether or not they're going to warranty, right? So there's all this information out there that you don't know whether or not it's really true when it comes to the mechanical aspect of what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You mentioned Corvette. So I actually did a little research in advance of this because I wanted to figure out, hey, what's out there, right? And I found a source, Haggerty, which I think they're affiliated with an insurance carrier. So they're the ones that would cover the physical damage. And they got the question, hey, what OEMs or what manufacturers allow tracking of a vehicle? And they specifically cite Chevy covers Camaro and Corvettes for tracking. Now, again, this is from them, so I can't validate or confirm this source, but they're claiming that Chevy will cover the C7 and the C8 Corvettes. Now, here's what's interesting, though. Even in this article, it kind of confirms what I've known. They won't cover it if you modify it. So any modification. Now, how many people, Dave, take a car on track unmodified? Now, the C7, C8 or the C7 and C8 are super high performance vehicles as they come, but usually you see some sort of a modification. And in warranty language, a failure that's caused by a modification clearly is never going to be covered by anyone. So you chip a vehicle, it changes the programming on it, you burn the transmission up, the transmission's not going to be covered. If you had a failure to a part that was not impacted by the chipping, oftentimes that would be covered. But it is interesting in this carve out, Chevy, according to this article, even defines, they say, hey, what is track driving? Well, track driving, they specify what it means. They say, quote, high performance features are intended for use only on closed tracks by experienced qualified drivers and should not be used on public roads. So if you're racing on a public road, they're going to say, hey, that's no bueno. And if it's in a paid competitive sport and there's a failure as a result of the paid sport, they're going to probably deny that as well. In which case, and we'll get into this later, I'm sure, many people are going to say, well, how would they know? How do they know what I'm doing, where I am, and what I'm up to? Right?
Yeah, let's get into that now, because that was one of the questions that I have is like, can you tell if they don't tell you where they were or what they were doing when that happened?
So here's what's interesting. So if you buy the car from, let's say, Chevy, and Chevy is confronted with a claim on the vehicle and they suspect racing, that might be one channel. But let's talk about a aftermarket warranty. So I worked for Swiss-based insurance F&I provider Zurich. So oftentimes you'll go in, you'll buy a used car from a dealership, and you might buy a warranty from a company like Zurich or CNA or Auto Owners or Allstate or whoever. And they're going to step in, and if you have a failure, they're going to cover that failure, okay? Now, here's what's fascinating. You come in, they think, hey, there's something odd about the way this transmission blew up. Like some vehicles, they can go back and check the OBD2, and they can see that it happened to high revolutions. They're going to suspect it's racing, but they're not going to know for sure. What Zurich did back in the day, and this was 10 years ago, and I'm sure there's better tools at their disposal right now. Show me one person that goes on track that doesn't take pictures and post it to Facebook, Instagram, social media, everywhere. So if you have a picture of you anywhere out there with you in that vehicle and you're talking about your conquests and exploits, it's going to make it very easy for that provider to decline it based on either a racing or a tracking exclusion. They're going to say, hey, it blew up in a high RPM environment. It blew up in a way that you never see on a normal freeway. So either you're racing, which you shouldn't be doing, or you've tracked it. And if they can show pictures of you tracking it, they're going to decline it. And typically, I've seen that hold up very well, even if it goes to court.
Thank you for that confirmation right there, because that has been something that occasionally I will tell people, like I'll say, hey, look, I'll post up a picture of your car and say that I coached you, but I'm not going to post up a picture of you unless you want me to do that. I also have seen that people will cover up their license plates or remove their license plates because that's pretty easily identifiable. So these are all these things that people go, should I do it? Do I need to do it? And what I'm hearing you say is probably.
The car is pretty identifiable. If the picture of the car is associated with you and that car comes in for a repair, most third-party warranty companies have ways of like researching. And look, if I see a picture of your car on social media, even if there's no license plate on it and I'm not totally sure if it's the same car, they're typically identifiers that are unique to your car and no one else's. It's the little ding in the rear right quarter panel, right? Or it's the foggy lens cover front left, right? That you could tie it back to.
So using that example, Sam, one thing that I see, you mentioned about not a lot of people put their car on the track unless it's modified. I don't know if I 100% agree with that. I see a lot of people that they're like, hey, I wanted to take my Mustang out on the track. I'd never done it before. And they show up with the car. I have coached that situation a lot. I do wish they would modify the brake fluid. I do wish they would modify the brakes, because you're putting the car under more stress. But a lot of the other stuff isn't necessarily necessary. So if someone just takes their car out once or twice on a road course and it's safe and they're not racing anybody, to me, that seems like that's not as big of a deal, but maybe it still is. I don't know. What do you think about that?
So in that scenario, my question would be, when you're trying to get a repair covered, what happens in that scenario? Like in the description you're talking about, like when we drove those Lotus cars on that track, what did we get at top speed?
Oh, when we were going through that, it wasn't much. It was probably 80 or 90 because we were lead follow too. They were throttling us.
So in a track controlled situation, what's the max speed?
On HPDE?
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking what I've done. I've done 147 in a GT4 on a straight, but that's different than a school, right? And I think also we need to kind of create the separation there too, because if you go to a Porsche Experience Center, you go to Lexus Performance Driving School, there's a liability limit that is placed on you driving their cars. We're talking about someone driving their car. And I think in particular, I'm talking about mechanical issues versus an accident. You get in an accident, you're on your own, or you have track insurance. I don't think there's any gray area on that. So I'm talking more like they drove their car 6 months ago or a year ago on the track. They put it up to, I don't know, maybe 100 miles an hour, never had an incident, didn't run into anybody, nothing like that. And then something later comes along. Is there really much of a difference between that and driving on the freeway at 90 miles an hour?
So talk to me. I'd be curious from your listeners, what mechanical failures do you see at 100 miles an hour on a track like that? I just don't see.
No, I don't. No, I think that's a great question to reflect it back. The answer is no more than any other situation. Where I see these kinds of breakdowns come is if someone is not diligent in checking the fluids, they're not diligent in checking the temperatures, perhaps they're taking the car out on 100-degree weather and they're not cooling off, right? They're pushing the car for longer and higher a speed than it is prepared to go. And I word it that way because, fluid changes and making sure that the oil is of good quality and changed recently can do a lot to mitigate these kinds of things.
But how often in the track setting that you described are you going to experience a failure? That's what I'm trying to think about. You mentioned earlier that like the Lexus driving experience, we don't have a Lexus store, but I'm familiar with a lot of those. You actually sign a liability waiver that says I'm responsible for damage, right?
Up to a level. They typically have an amount like $5,000 or $10,000, and then it's capped. The Lotus school that we did not have that. And I gave them a lot of grief about it, honestly. They were making us sign it all over. But yeah, you go to a Porsche Experience Center, you go to Lexus, you go to a BMW school, there's typically a liability cap that you're agreeing to.
Yeah. I think the bigger issue for a dealership looking to get a repair covered from a manufacturer is you have a vehicle that is super proud to be racing, right? You've got the stickers on it. You've got some bars that have been installed in it. You've got, switches and whatnot that shouldn't be there. And then it's chipped, right? And we see that a lot in trucks as an example.
For those who aren't familiar, what's chipped?
So you can put a chip in the engine and it changes the way it shifts and it takes away the limits on the RPMs. And so it opens it up to all sorts of performance issues. Like the things that are intended to be in the engine to protect the engine are removed. And so a driver less experienced is going to burn the engine up.
But I think that's helpful logically to separate modifications from the driving. It's a little outside what we talk about, but I think it's helpful to notice when you modify the car's performance outside of what it was intended by the manufacturer, you're taking your warranty into your own hands. My understanding, and maybe you can clarify this, Sam, is there's a law, and I can't remember the name of the law in the United States that says it's it only changes the warranty to the type of modification that was made. So for instance, if you modify the engine, then the engine is now subject to not being covered by warranty. But if you modify the brakes, only the brakes are not possibly subject to the warranty, but the engine would still be. Is that correct? And
so I'm unfamiliar with a law, but when you think about warranty companies or vehicle service contract companies, I do know that there's specific language to the effect of, hey, a failure that results from the modification is not covered, but a failure not related to the modification is. And so if a vehicle service contract finds out that the engine's been chipped and you have a failure to something unrelated to the engine, they'll most likely pay for that. And then most likely they'll come back to you and they'll say, hey, look, this is chipped. Let's cancel the contract, right? Because there's not enough coverage to justify the premium that we've paid you. So either you didn't understand that, or you did understand it and you thought you could get away with it, right? And I've seen all sorts of things. I've seen people try to remove those things before they bring it in for a repair, which there's always evidence of that, right? So that's tricky. And you know what I would say, Dave? I think the best advice is transparency. You know, if you've got that Mazda Miata and you're looking to track it, go into the Mazda store and say, look, this thing's under warranty. What can I do and not do before it falls outside? And where can I go and not go before I have a problem? Or go into BMW and say, hey, I've got an M series, whatever, and this is what I'm going to do. Where's the line here? And we want your business at a dealership in the service department. And so we'll be a good partner. Most dealerships would, at helping you to see where that line is. Because, you know, in automotive, it's a very healthy relationship between the consumer and the dealership, and then the dealership and the manufacturer. The dealership wants you to get as much coverage as you can reasonably possibly get from the manufacturer. Like, we spend a lot of time and energy advocating for and on behalf of the customer. The challenge becomes when we get lied to, and that happens a lot, or there's some sort of a story that we relay to the manufacturer that turns out not to be true, and they find evidence otherwise. And then we've got and then that is where it'll get tagged, and it'll be tough to ever get coverage for something ever again.
What I'm hearing from you, Sam, is let's be reasonable about what we expect a manufacturer to cover and what a dealership is and is not going to do. And if you bring your car in that's all stickered up with a roll cage in it, there are going to be questions. And the odds of you getting service on a car like that you've abused is not going to be high.
Unless that particular manufacturer is okay with it. And you won't know that unless you have that conversation, right?
Well, this has been really helpful and really interesting, Sam. And I knew that you were I love that you came prepared, and you also just have the mind of a radio host, right? You know how to keep this entertaining. I really appreciate that. Are there any other things that perhaps we didn't cover that someone should be aware of or think about if they're thinking, I'm going to put my sports car on the track? Again, talking just about performance driving rather than wheel racing.
I think you said it right. The more transparent you feel comfortable with being, it's a risk assessment, right? It's an assessment of, you know, I've made an investment in a car. I want to go do something that's fun. And my risk assessment is, am I okay if I wreck the vehicle on the track and there's no coverage? If you're not, find a company like you mentioned, Dave, to help provide coverage while it's on track.
And I'm going to emphasize one thing that I've heard many times, and I'm going to say it to everyone listening, is do not put a car on the track that you're not prepared to push off a cliff, either through insurance or through your own expenses. If it's on the edge of your expenses, then you probably should rethink what you're driving on the track.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And guess what's a good backup to that, by the way? So our NASCAR driver, Carson Hocevar, is famous for actually spending a ton of time in the sim. And his favorite sim is PlayStation, right? And you'll see him often in the gaming world driving in virtual. You can actually race against these NASCAR drivers there. And he says if you get the right setup, which I imagine is probably less than the cost of an expensive Miata, you can actually have a great experience there.
So this is a great place to start wrapping up, Sam. So what I do at the end is we have a pit stop question that kind of slows us down and gets us thinking about this whole expense thing. And then I'll ask some hot lap questions, which are just quick questions to just get your quick response to it. You ready?
Very good. Let's go.
Okay, so first of all, the pit stop question is, what is the most expensive lesson that you have learned, or I'm going to say see someone else learn when it comes to driving on the track? Do you have a response for that?
So last time we were at Autobahn, I saw a Mazda Miata, a Radical, and a Ferrari, beautiful Ferrari. I forget which model, out on the track, same time, all doing laps. And you could tell the Mazda was wanting to compete a little bit with the Ferrari. And you could tell the Ferrari was not as well experienced. And there's the tale of two cars. The Ferrari is incredibly capable, a ton of power. And you probably shouldn't be behind the wheel of it until you've got some experience. And then we had our NASCAR driver out on track as well in the Radical running his laps. And the Ferrari ended up in the ditch and wrecked. The takeaway for me was start at a level, gain proficiency, and grow and develop as your risk appetite increases. Sometimes if you have a little too much money and you're okay with risk, you're going to probably flush it all away.
Did the Ferrari have an instructor in the car with him when this occurred?
No idea. I doubt it. I can't imagine. I think it was just open track. He was out enjoying himself.
Yeah, and that's why I would say please get instruction. Whether it's your first time or your 100th time, you can benefit from having an instructor working with you either in the car or lead follow to improve your skills. And all of us need to improve our skills. If Max Verstappen uses a driving coach, where does that put the rest of us? We all need that driving coach. So thank you for sharing that lesson. Okay, so here are the hot lap questions. Favorite car you've driven?
So here's the crazy thing. I'm in automotive, but I'm terribly non-emotional as it comes to cars.
Maybe that's a good thing.
Like, I don't look at it as anything more than an investment. I will tell you the brand that I love is BMW. I think it's tough to beat the driving experience that BMW almost anything delivers. I love the BMW brand.
So maybe you answered that next question because you're not emotional about it, but is there a bucket list car you haven't driven that you want to?
You know what? So I go to a lot of NASCAR races and a lot of Formula One races. I would love to take a lap in a Formula One car. I've done it in a sim, and I know how difficult it is. Like, they are not as easy to drive as they look, at least in the sim. It would be fun to take a lap in a Formula One car.
And that's one of the great things about Sims is you get to experience lots of different types of cars, especially if you have a good sim like we have. We've got a couple of Sims side by side that my son and I built together, and they've got not motion, but rumbles on all four corners. So it gives you a very real experience. So then that leads to the next question. What is your favorite track that you've driven in real life or on a sim?
So in a sim, I think Daytona is fun just because it's such an iconic track, and I've been there as part of NASCAR and for other events. You know, Autobahn, I've been there enough that's just a heck of a lot of fun. I've driven a Corvette there and a couple of other vehicles just around the track. It's a fun. Heck, our experience we had in Utah was a lot of fun, and that was in a Lotus, right? So,
do you remember the best driving instruction you've ever received? What's one piece of driving advice?
Ooh. So it's with Carson, and I learned very quickly, you find someone who's great and you follow their line. And I was able to drive better after 10, 12 laps following him as best I could by just following his line, you know. And then look, this is going to expose me as a complete amateur and beginner, but right down to braking timing, and so much of driving kind of defies what's going on in your head from street driving. And it's different on a track when you're going for speed and control. And it's fun to think about the different angles and lines you take. So the more you follow somebody that is an absolute professional, makes it more fun, and you're able to do things you never thought you could do.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then I'll just insert something as a coach too. Lead follow is fantastic. I do it with my students. As you're doing lead follow, meaning following the person in front of you, practice doing it in your peripheral vision. So rather than staring down them and staring down their line, you keep that line in the side of your vision, but then you look where you're supposed to go and keep your eyes where you're going after this look ahead.
Props to all the instructors, by the way, because as I think about those different experiences, I've had a couple of experiences where I've had somebody seated to my right and, they're telling you, slow down, speed up, follow the line. Here's what, can you imagine what a terrifying experience it would be to know what you're supposed to do in every single second? And you may have some guy that's not super smart or gal next to you not following directions. I've been that at times. And then somebody who does. How terrifying is it to be in a high power machine with somebody that may or may not be following directions and you're just along for the ride? So props to all the instructors out there.
Yeah. And I'm going to say this, it's a little self-serving, but I do it. Tip them. Tip them generously because they're putting their bodies and their life on the line for it. So I have both been on the receiving end of that, and I also do that on the delivering end when I have had coaches. So yeah, thank you for that endorsement of that. Sam, thank you so much for being here and doing this interview. It was absolutely entertaining and insightful, and I appreciate you stirring our thinking about these things. If someone wants to, well, first of all, we want to encourage people to listen to your podcast, which is...
So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, we're live across X, Facebook, LinkedIn. It's called the Daily Dealer Live. So you can just Google Daily Dealer Live. You'll see it. Yeah, that's probably the best. That's probably the best one to see. At Ziegler, I've got one called Driving Vision, which is a heck of a lot of fun. Talks about the things we do here inside the Ziegler Auto Group. But for those who are fascinated by automotive, that love the industry and want to keep up to date on it, we interview dealers, vendors, people across the industry every single week. It's a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah, you're an expert if you want to get insight into the inner workings of car dealerships and the car industry. So that's a great resource.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam, for being here and giving us this insight. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Remember, eyes up and stay fluid.
You've been listening to Drive Sports, the amateur track driver podcast, hosted by DMC and produced by Drive Sports LLC. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bidez. Music is by Elegant via Premium Beat Licensing. If you have a question, guest suggestion, or a track DMC should visit, please send it to show@drivesport.co. Please subscribe to Drive Sport on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. And follow us on social media at Drive Sport Co. We'll see you in the next episode.
Track days are fun, but also unpredictable. That's part of the thrill. When the unexpected and expensive lesson happens, you'll be glad your car is protected by OpenTrack Insurance, found at drivesport.co/insurance. OpenTrack offers full vehicle coverage and liability insurance, something you just don't find with most track day policies. And if you're a true track rat like me, they even offer annual coverage, so you're protected at every event throughout the year. It's a great deal. Get a quote today at drivesport.co/insurance. You can drive safer, be more confident, and have more fun knowing your car is protected by OpenTrack. Visit drivesport.co/insurance.